Hey guys, JT here. So, yes, I did complete all of the Slisher Slasher update, but I want to get through a few thoughts. So, first of all, in regards to no saving Penny M, that's kind of unfortunately true. We head back to the library here and we get some updates. And they're good updates, but also bad because Penny may have been compromised by Miss Hecate. Hi everyone, Penny M here. A bit of a surprise, isn't it? Apologies for no new articles to accompany this update post. However, it felt important to let you all know what's happening with me. Life's been good. I've been doing the best I can. Here's a cool diorama I saw at work. And I will get into these two, Wishful Winnie and Millie Moonbeam. It will be kind of quick, but I'll get into them. Let's not delay any further, however. I understand many of you long-time followers of this site have been frustrated or implied such sentiments regarding my neglect in discussing or documenting Miss Hecate, our local cartoon mystery. Truthfully, after everything that happened with Ikak, I wasn't sure if I would ever truly commit to following through on our initial mission statement. Need time to put myself back together. I hope you understand. However, I've been thinking about it, and all things considered, enough time has passed that I'm finally in a good headspace to devote an update to her and her alone. One great big update compiled of all the information everyone sent me, and there is a lot of it. Some of it's scary, some of it's sad, and some of it's beautiful. Those around for the Beatrice update should be prepared for a blunt and honest look at these companies. Ian, I hope you're ready to see your work completed to the best of my abilities. I'll get it done. To all of you, I'll be seeing you around. I have a feeling this update will be something really special. And for those who are lost, long story short, um, Big Ack was one of Penny's former friends, or still friends, when he hosted a party that she couldn't make, showing the Hellish Swellish tape that he found. Well, the party went up into flames, literally, and everybody died. And since then, Penny has not been in a good headspace between that and her fallout with Jane. Radius of impact. I Penny, oh Miss M, the red flags are just beaming at me. Hello, Penny M here. Another post I hear you ask? Yeah, I'm a bit surprised at how good I feel working on this update. A bit too excited to keep it all inside, you know? This reminds me of the good old days, back when it was me and the team getting this thing off the ground, traveling across the states, but I promise this isn't going to turn into a vanity blog. I have my eyes on that special update, 90, maybe even 100% of the time. Speaking of, I never really knew how influential Hecate was. I mean, I had an idea based on her influence on Helena and Harmonia, but I'm learning about so many new characters in such a short amount of time. I might have to pick the most notable ones and leave the rest for the later updates, because there will be more updates on Hecate, who I have neglected for so long. Sorry again for the post, just really excited. Also, Miss Hecate is totally not pointing a gun at the back of my head, or is mind washing me, or has brainwashed me into doing all of this. I am completely fine. Dang it, Slasher, I know I owe you for all the times I accidentally called you Slishy, but come on. Is there something I can do? Something? Anything? Look, Miss Hecate, how about this? Instead of corrupting Penny M, why don't you start a video game channel? Hecate Gaming. That's catchy. Hey guys, Miss Hecate here. I'm gonna be playing Super Mario Bros. Yeah. This game is something wonderful, something special. I tell you what. Anyway, if you guys don't mind, I want to talk about two characters who I just adore to help me cope with all this. Millie and Winnie. Also, go to RWs for a second because this is what Murphy added that was new. Fold RW. You know what? I've got time. We'll read this. R.W. Winfield is most well known for his book Hearth of Meadow Valley and its following series of sequel novels. Newspaper artist, illustrator, author, Winfield was a man of many talents and was possessed by a restlessness to explore new mediums. Born into a wealthy family from a young age, Winfield had always been fascinated with the arts. However, due to his lineage, such pursuits were actively discouraged by his parents who wished for the young Winfield to follow in his father's footsteps. But the medical field was, in Winfield's words, a stifling profession. So at the time of his 18th birthday, Winfield ran away from home to elope with Irene Amber, a much older woman from a rivaling family. It would only be many years later, when his father was on his deathbed, that Winfield returned home to recoil with the family he left behind. Amber and Winfield's marriage started off amicably, and for some time the two were happy in one another's presence. However, in the third year of their arrangement, the two would get into terrible bouts, and in the following October, the two would divorce, leaving Winfield on his own. During this time, Winfield worked as a hot presser while attempting to hone his artistry skills with several rejected submissions to the newspaper companies in his area. Winfield, a stubborn and unyielding man, continued to improve upon his craft for the next several years before finally being offered a job by a sympathetic friend. His name was his friend Mitch Barr, head of the Linder Tribune, hired Winfield to illustrate short stories in the paper. For a time, though, a very morose appearing man was happy with his work at the Loon Minder. His work was fairly well received by audiences, especially his illustrations that accompanied the short fantasy stories in the paper. His work was characterized by astonishing detailed creatures and landscapes, with an amazing use of hatching and ink work. The arrangements between Mitch and Winfield was amicable for a time. However, the cracks of their friendships would start to show when Winfield began to pursue other avenues of creative expression by making his own cartoons and attractions on the side. Mitch claimed that this was a violation of his agreement with Lunder Tribune and conflict of interest. In fear of losing his job, Winfield reluctantly dropped his external ventures, an event that caused Winfield to forever hold a grudge against Mitch. Tensions would come to a head when payments for Winfield's work at the Lunder began to come in later and later, with his last payment from the months being several months his last payment from the company being several months late. This was the final straw, causing Winfield to sever his relationships with Mitch Breer and Linder Tribune. Despite being barred from external ventures while working at the View, Winfield had been privately working on several concepts. Inspired by the stories he had illustrated during his career, Winfield had written the prototype for a novel called The Hearth of Meadow Valley. The story detailed the adventures of Millie Moonbeam, a small lightning bug in a fantastical world. After several revisions and much fighting, Winfield managed to secure the assurance of Norwal Wool Publishing in the distribution of his novel. The novel was a hit with audiences, with Winfield receiving immense royalties and praise for his work. For years, Winfield received letters from children expressing their wonderment at the adventures of Millie Moonbeam, and as well as a desire for a sequel. In spite of their pleas, Winfield was fairly steadfast in his desire to move on to other projects. Winfield's mind would change upon receiving a letter from a little girl that rather bluntly implied him to be a one-hit wonder and capable of competent commitment. Charmed by her letter, Winfield began writing the sequel to his award-winning novel, and the following year released it to an eager audience. Spurred on by the success of his sequel, and because it was putting food on the table, Winfield would go on to release more books, most being small collections of stories from the world of Meadow Valley. Near the later years of his life, Winfield would enter communication with a company called Serial Productions. They had approached him with the offer of adopting Hearth of Meadow Valley into a live action movie. Ever since his childhood, Winfield had been fascinated by moving pictures, his greatest dream being to have his work shown on the silver screen. With his fame and excitement clouding his judgment, Winfield signed on board and thus began a long and painful production that was perhaps doomed from the start. The movie, by all accounts, was an movie was by all accounts a nightmare to work on. The conditions were notably horrible, with several actors and actresses passed out on the set due to stress. Several props caught on fire. One of the actors was poisoned by aluminum dust, and multiple writers quit mid-production. Oh, hey, this reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, because that production was a nightmare. So throughout it all, Winfield reported feeling helpless against the inadequacy and ignorance of Circle Wheel, and feeling a sense of doom towards the chances of the film ever completing production. These fears were proven correct when, after several years of toiling, Circle Wheel went bankrupt and production ceased. Defeated, bitter, and tired, Winfield was then approached by animation studio Liquid Laugh Pictures. The company offered him the chance to make an animated short film featuring Millie Moonbeam. In his desperation to see his work on the big screen, Winfield signed on board without realizing that by doing so, he was giving up ownership of Millie to Liquid Laugh. The details of Millie's ownership would not be made explicit to Winfield until after the production and release of the film, a film he had been invited to watch the opening showing of. Damn. This was the event that drove Winfield to the darkest place of his life, and soon after, Winfield was documented to have made an attempt on his own life. He retired to his old countryside home and released one more book, featuring his other popular character, Wishful Winnie. This book, however, was not well received due to its dark nature, and today it's fairly unknown compared to his body of work. In the final years of his life, Winfield would pour his money into the construction of a library dedicated to the preservation of literature. It took a year and a half to complete and was named the Winfield Library. A month after its completion, Winfield would be found dead in the library, his cause of death being undetermined. I don't want to make assumptions, but I always feel like his death was suspicious to some extent. Like, did he see Wishful Winnie in his final moments, or did Hecate, for whatever reason, go after him? I don't know. But Millie Moonbeam, speaking of her, the wonderful child of prolific American cartoonist and author R.W. Winfield, Millie Moonbeam is most famous for her adventures and pearls as the protagonist of Winfield's 1920 book, Hearth of Meadow Valley. In this book, Millie and a small firefly falls out of her garden one morning and onto the fields of Meadow Valley, an all-encompassing world of green flowers and vines. Filled with bugs, pixies, and fearsome critters, she must find the dying hearth of Meadow Valley and reignite it with her light. In these books, Millie was characterized as a pathetic but fairly clueless individual. This served as a way to introduce audiences to her world as she encountered new people and places, and had then explained to her. Millie had a proximity for fire, and she was the only character in her world that could wield it. Although engage her to share her gifts with others, sometimes she got carried away, especially around her more wooden friends. The story was a great hit with audiences, and Winfield would go on further to write further stories featuring Millie Moonbeam, but she would go on to be slightly overshadowed by Winfield's other character, Wishful Winnie. Regardless, Millie was a very important character in Winfield's life, and as she had no children, as he had no children or surviving family to speak of. When interviewed following the release of his third novel, he was noted as saying, "Millie, in all her wonder and luminous charm, is my only daughter." And then other thing to note is that she was integrated into the lore of Maisie Mutt by Liquid Laugh Studios. So what about Wishful Winnie? She captured Millie on her adventures and sang a rhyme about fleshing, and eating the unfortunate bug before being tricked by Millie into jumping into her own boiling pot. Oddly enough, this behavior did not deter children from adoring Winnie, perhaps due to her whimsical, illustrated appearance. Children would write numerous letters begging Winfield to write a sequel to the first novel. In their letters, they would mention the character of Winnie and wanted to see more of her schemes and songs. After many letters and knocks on his door, Winfield relented and wrote a sequel to his first book that was released about 2 years after the first novel. The book would return to the world of Meadow Valley, in which large rolling machines have descended upon the gardens. On her adventure to reach the central machine, Millie Moonbeam was this time aided by a remorseful but still precious Wishful Winnie, much to the delight of children everywhere. It should be noted that although more popular than Millie Moonbeam, R.W. Winfield never liked Winnie that much. In fact, near the end of his life, he was recorded as saying he hated the character. He would call her an awful little beast that, for some reason, beastly children seemed to love. And then in current times, Winnie serves as the face of the R.W. Winfield Library, and you can see a statue of her in front of the entrance, which, given what we found out about with the slasher statue coming to life, kind of scares me. Because does that mean that that statue's going to come to life too? And one other thing to note is Arthur Meadow Valley. Created near the end of Winfield's life, this previous mentioned book as was Winfield's final published book, and it was a very hard one to obtain at that. So basically, Winfield put all his rage into and took it out on Winnie, and he gave her a bit of a merciful end, in where she discovers a, let me see, wherever it says. Well, somewhere explains that she did go into a ink thing to other worlds, but yeah. Winfield just destroyed his old creation, and I love to hear Millie's side of this because I know she's got to be upset about seeing her sister like this, and then seeing everything that happened to the world she once loved. And I don't want to get too enthusiastic, but I'm curious to know if the next the next update after Hecate is going to be of the twins. But we will have to find out because apparently Hecate's got a firm grasp on our friend Penny. So that is all for now, guys. I will get to the Hecate update when it comes out, if not right away, soon enough. But in the meantime, this is JT signing out. See you guys next time. And to everybody on the Pendog Creative Archive team, I wish you best of luck. Thank you guys for putting this project out there.